The East Lancashire Regiment was, from 1881 to 1958, a line infantry regiment of the British Army. The regiment was formed in 1881 under the Childers reforms by the amalgamation of the 30th Regiment of Foot and 59th Regiment of Foot with the militia and rifle volunteer units of Eastern Lancashire. In 1958, the regiment was amalgamated with the South Lancashire Regiment to form the Lancashire Regiment, which was, in 1970, merged with the Loyal Regiment to form the Queen's Lancashire Regiment. However, in 2006, the Queen's Lancashire were amalgamated with the King's Own Royal Border Regiment and the King's Regiment to form the present Duke of Lancaster's Regiment. Formation and service to 1914. Regular battalions. The 1st Battalion was formed from the 30th Regiment of Foot and the 2nd Battalion from the 59th Regiment of Foot, and the regiment was renamed the East Lancashire Regiment in July 1881, under the system introduced in 1881. One battalion of each infantry regiment was to serve at a home station while the other was in a foreign garrison or on active service. Due to the emergency caused by the outbreak of war in South Africa in 1899, most home service battalions were dispatched to the conflict. Militia and volunteer territorial battalions. The 1881 reforms also linked the militia and rifle volunteer units of the area into the regimental structure. The 5th Royal Lancashire Militia was redesignated as the 3rd Battalion of the East Lancashire Regiment. The 2nd Lancashire Rifle Volunteer Corps, based at Blackburn, renamed to 1st Volunteer Battalion, East Lancashire Regiment in 1889. The 3rd Lancashire Rifle Volunteer Corps, based at Burnley, renamed to 2nd Volunteer Battalion, East Lancashire Regiment in 1889. The militia was a reserve force that was only liable to service in the United Kingdom and in peacetime assembled for period of annual training. In time of war it could be embodied or mobilized. When the war that broke out in South Africa in 1899 began to absorb a large amount of the regular army's resources, the terms of service of the militia were altered to allow them to serve in the war. The 3rd Battalion was embodied in January 1900 and served in South Africa until 1902. It was disembodied in March 1902. The battalion was awarded the Battle Honour, South Africa 1900 to 1902. The volunteer battalions were organised for home defence purposes, and the members were subject to regular drills and training. Like the militia battalion, elements of the volunteers fought in South Africa, while members of the volunteer force could not be required to serve overseas. Members from the battalions were voluntarily formed into active service companies, providing reinforcements for the regular battalion. Both volunteer battalions were awarded battle honours for the war. 1908 reorganisation. In 1908, under the Territorial and Reserve Forces Act 1907, the militia and volunteer force were reconstituted as the Special Reserve and Territorial Force. Territorial battalions were renumbered in series after the Special Reserve battalions. The resulting titles were 3rd Battalion, 4th Battalion, 5th Battalion. The territorial force was restructured into 14 infantry divisions, and the 4th and 5th Battalions formed part of the East Lancashire Brigade of the East Lancashire Division. It was as part of that division that were to be mobilised in August 1914 after the outbreak of World War I. First World War. The size of the regiment was increased during the conflict, reaching a total of 17 battalions. Victoria Crosses. 4 members of the regiment were awarded the Victoria Cross for gallantry. Drummer Spencer John Bent, 1st Battalion. Private William Young, 8th Battalion. 2nd Lieutenant Alfred Victor Smith, 1, 5th Battalion. 2nd Lieutenant Basil Arthur Horsfall, attached to 11th Battalion. Interwar. Between the wars, the East Lancashire served in many conflicts including Balochistan, Afghanistan, Ireland, Turkey, Palestine and the northwest frontier of India. Second World War. The East Lancashire Regiment was again increased in size for the duration of the Second World War, although not to such an extent as in 1914 to 1918. Firstly, prior to the outbreak of hostilities in 1939, the entire Territorial Army was doubled in size, with each unit forming a duplicate. Secondly, a number of wartime battalions were formed. Victoria Cross Captain Harold Marcus Irvine Andrews of the 1st Battalion was awarded the Victoria Cross for gallantry at Dunkirk on 31 May to 1 June, 1940. Post-war. In 1948, the regiment was reduced to a single regular battalion. They served in the Middle East, Malaya, the Suez Canal Zone, and Aden. Badges. When the two regiments of foot merged in 1881, new badges were designed that would endure for the rest of the regiment's existence, subject to changes in the style of crown, and which would be worn on the later service dress and battle dress uniforms. The headdress badge selected for the center of the full-dress helmet was a sphinx upon a plinth inscribed, Egypt. The Sphinx had been awarded to the 30th Foot in 1802 to mark its participation in repelling the French invasion of Egypt. The collar badge selected was the Red Rose of Lancaster to mark the regiment's county affiliation. In 1897, a khaki uniform featuring a slouch hat was introduced, and a metal cap badge was devised for each regiment or corps. The badge of the East Lancashire was the Sphinx in Egypt, above the rose, the whole enclosed within a laurel wreath topped by a crown. The laurel wreath had formed part of the insignia of the 59th Foot. A scroll inscribed, East Lancashire, at the base of the badge completed the design. Amalgamation. In 1957, defense cuts were announced that significantly reduced the size of the army. As a result, the East Lancashire Regiment was amalgamated with the South Lancashire Regiment on 1 July 1958 to form the Lancashire Regiment. In 1970, the Lancashire Regiment was in turn amalgamated with the Loyal Regiment to form the Queen's Lancashire Regiment. In 2006, the Queen's Lancashire Regiment was merged with the King's Own Royal Border Regiment and King's Regiment to form a new large regiment, the Duke of Lancaster's Regiment. Battle Honours. The regiment was awarded the following battle honours. Earlier wars: Gibraltar 1704–05, Belle Isle, Chitral, South Africa 1900–02. First World War: Le Cateau, retreat from Mons, Marne 1914, Aisne 1914, 18, Armentières 1914, Neuve-Chapelle, Ypres 1915, 17, 18, Saint-Julien, Fresenberg, Bellewaerde, Aubers, Somme 1916, 18, Albert 1916, 18, Bazentin, Pozières, Le Transloy, Ancre 1916, 18, Arras 1917, 18, Scarpa 1917, 18, Arleux, Oppy, Messines 1917, Pilcombe, Longyemarque 1917, Polygon Wood, Brood Saint-Dié, Poel-Capelle, Passchendaele, Saint Quentin, Bapaume 1918, Rosiers, Villers-Bretonneux, Lys, Esters, Hazebrouck, Bailleul, Kemmel, Hindenburg Line, Canal du Nord, Cambrai 1918, Celle, Valenciennes, Samba, France and Flanders 1914–18, Costurino, Duran 1917–18, Macedonia 1915–18, Hels, Krithia, Suvla, Sari-Baire, Gallipoli 1915, Roumanie, Egypt 1915–17. Tigris 1916, Kut al-Amara 1917, Baghdad, Mesopotamia 1916–17. Second World War. Defense of Escaut, Dunkirk 1940, Caen, Falaise, Nadrain, Lower Mars, Auvergne, Rhineland, Reichswald, Wies, Rhine, Ibbenbüren, Alais. Northwest Europe 1940, 44–45, Madagascar, North Arakan, Pinwa, Burma 1944–45.